Warning. The following may contain concepts, ideas, and/or reflections unique in nature and not yet approved by government and/or corporate entities. This content is for entertainment purposes only and is not intended to stimulate further reflection or to perpetuate additional discourse beyond the scope already outlined by institutional curriculum.
All right, forest fires. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Got a little bit of data to go through, but should be somewhat interesting. All right, the intro. All right, so before we start ripping on this, let's kind of go through a bit of the data that I was able to get. By the way, like normal, Google is hell to use now. If you want to try to get anything, you got like maybe 20 to 30 results. Gone are the days of the 2 million results from any one particular search.
Well, there's like a handful of guardians guarding the gate, the doors.
Yeah.
The gatekeepers.
That's right.
Of info.
So, okay, so the first, where do we want to start? I think Europe is a good place to start when talking about
Europe?
Forest fires because, one of the first things I want to kind of lay down is that there's two sets of data that are typically provided. One is total hectares or acres that are burned. And then the second one is the amount of fires. In my opinion, that second one is kind of crap data because who really cares how many fires there are if they're insignificant, if they're incredibly tiny? It's kind of useless data in a sense.
Yeah, sometimes a farmer will burn off a small chunk of his pasture, whatever, just to...
Or some campers have a fire that, it's half an acre or something, and they put it out. It's a useless bit of data. But they, you'll see, actually, the BBC. I mean, it's shocking to me, actually, that the BBC would fail to do proper journalism. I can't believe it. But they actually have an article just covering global forest fire trends.
I'm sure they're keeping it as general as possible.
Of course. And they'll mix and match. I'll get to that, actually, too. But they'll mix and match the data. So they'll go from number of forest fires to area affected, but like all of the charts will have the same coloration, look identical, and so a layman might go in there and they're looking at the trends, they're looking at how the graph is moving, whether it's going an upward trend, a downward trend, whatever it is.
I guess Greece will happen to be on the list of burning area.
Yeah, so
an island nation that
mostly rock. Well, okay.
Mostly brush and some olive trees.
Here's the other piece of data is forest fire is a very generalized term. They don't really separate brush fires from forest fires. That, I think, is another important piece. We'll get into that as well. Okay, so the first bit of data is coming from West Europe. One last caveat. I know I got a lot, but... the other thing that these people will seem to want to do is very short charts. So if you're looking up historical data, they'll tend to want to concentrate on a little snippet. And so like in this case, it's going back to 1980. But for me, if you're looking at a macro trend...
Well,
it's
you would
not
think,
really that great.
You would think, though, that if they gave more in-depth, exhaustive reporting on it, then it would lead to maybe possibly more questions. And so
Right.
they want to minimize the amount of questions.
Yeah, lying with numbers or the data.
Just get the
And-
basic general story out and let it have its effect.
Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into the actual charts here. So in West Europe, basically, I mean, I'm gonna put the chart up on the screen, but I mean, you're seeing it's bouncing up and down. There's really hardly any trend that one could extrapolate from it. The only thing I would note.
And when does this chart start? Like what month? Or is this just
This is
current?
going back from 1980, the year 1980, and then it's going up to 2020. One note is like a country like France is barely even registering anything. So most Northern European, Western European countries aren't seeing basically any wildfires.
So all
essentially.
those vineyards are safe.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So okay, so that's the first bit. There's not a whole lot to see. I do. I'm gonna put this one up, which is the Portugal wildfires, and this one is showing just the number of fires that are occurring, but basically up till it looks like 1977, there was like nothing. So there was actually no recorded fires. And
Okay,
that's
so
been
when does the
increasing.
chart really rise? Like in the new millennia?
Probably about 1992, and that's an interesting year because that also seems like most historical charts want to go back to that time period and then go forward from there. So you're not getting anything prior to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so like moving on to Russia, because it's probably a more significant
Well,
area.
since it's the largest landmass in the world, you would think that, and it's primarily a boreal forest, I
So-
would imagine that conifers burn much easier than deciduous trees.
Sure. So this one is from Siberia. It's from the ScienceDirect.com, so I guess a somewhat legitimate website. This one, the data is only going back to 2001 up to 2017, so a pretty short snippet. It does look like this one's covering area burned. 2003 seemed like a big year, but interestingly enough, I've got another chart here that is it's from globalforestwatch.org, and this one, the data is completely the opposite, or it's not even, there's no pattern that seems to be recognizable. In the other data set, 2003, there was a huge amount of area burnt. In this one, it's basically normal / low normal.
Okay, so when does this
So-
chart start?
This other one is from 2001 to 2004. So basically the same timeline.
Right. So it seems
Same
like this
timeline.
new millennia, they don't want to go back any further, so that you could get a real better idea by looking back further, whether these seem to be normal cycles, or is this something that just seems to be raging on now in the last 25 years.
And now I got the third one from Russia is from the BBC, and this one is the number of fires. And there was a huge spike in 2003, so you could see that. And then other than that, it's kind of up and down. There's no real pattern that you could really extrapolate from those pieces. I think one
So
of the
what
more
happened? Oh.
shut up.
Okay.
One of the more interesting places is the U.S. because we can get older data that we can't seem to dredge up from the internet for any of these other places. So in the U.S., so the EPA. Now, I want to add that this data set from the EPA is titled "Climate Change Indicators." Wildfires. So it's definitely kind of like a guided piece of.
I mean, they had a purpose in composing and bringing forth this chart.
Yeah, it's important with any bit of data to have some motivation behind it. Otherwise, what's the point?
What's the point? Yeah.
It's just giving information to the dumb masses. Useless. So here we go back to 1980. And kind of up to 2021, 2022. It, of course, like any good government agency, they want to keep the chart as dumbed down and cartoonish as possible. So it's really, you're just getting a very general idea of what's actually being said.
I have a question.
Sure,
are we
go
talking
ahead.
about the scale of fires? Are they talking about the incidences?
This is the area. Like I said, they do go back and forth, but in this case, this is the area burned in millions of acres, and it's kind of like 8 million roughly to 6 million. It has risen like a little bit. But if you go to a larger bit of data, this one is the National Interagency Fire Center, so a government data source. And then I have another one that's coming from Yahoo Finance, but I think it's from the same source. But basically, these numbers kind of correlate to one another. There's a huge spike in from 1920 in the 1930s, there was like 50 million acres burned, and it's kind of been on a sort of downward trend, like huge drop. I mean, if you're talking about from like 45 million acres to like 8 on the high side.
In what time period?
Well, the modern era, so like from in the 2000s, 2016, et cetera, et cetera. So one might look at this data and go, whoa, the past had way more fires, right?
And
now,
obviously, though, because we don't really have the data, we don't know whether they were put out effectively.
Well, you don't know because I haven't given you all the data yet.
Okay.
So now this is not because we're Canadian that this is why the final coup de grace comes from that, but there is a major indicating factor in all of this data dump that we're doing that kind of gives a glimpse of what's happening and how they're distorting the numbers and how what these numbers actually are indicators of, if anything. So both of these are coming from this one is coming directly from the Canadian government, and then this other one is like a fire prevention, so it's preventionweb.net. The data for the area affected seems to be the same. So it seems to be covering the same region.
That looks like it's all the way from Alaska. Well, what's the red indicate?
Those are the fire hotspots or areas burned. So we'll get into that because that's the major takeaway. Now,
it seems like it almost follows the jet stream.
Well, yeah, amongst other things. So in this one from the government of Canada goes back to 1970 to actually 2024. There's this enormous spike in 2023, but I think we kind of remember that with huge amounts of smoke in the States and everything like that. Now, if you look at the macro data,
we didn't even charge Americans for that smoke either.
Anyway, if you look at the macro data, basically you're not going to see any like general trends. It's a chart that it's going up and down. It's there's peaks and valleys, but there's no real macro trend to extrapolate from this. This other from the preventionweb.net goes a little bit further back into the 1960s.
I want to make a point.
And you can kind of see a bit of a upward trend in the amount of forest fires. Okay, go with that, and then I'll wrap up.
Okay, my point in looking at that map is it seems like it's really in almost no population zones.
Okay, so that is my point. So that's what I was going to go into. If
Or
you
we're just
actually look,
segueing.
because we're Canadians, we do kind of have. Because we're Canadians, we do kind of have an idea of what the geographical area is. And now I'm going to ask you, if you look at this area, is any of this dense old growth forest?
No, most of it looks like muskeg.
There's huge
moose
tracts
country.
of prairies too.
Yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
massive amounts of this total area being affected is largely grasslands with maybe a kind of thin growth thicket.
Although I've never been up to the Northwest Territories, I mean, I think there is a little bit of boreal forest.
The Northwest Territories in that area is barely forest. Like in this area indicated, because this is inland.
Okay.
If it was along the coast, you would have some more dense conifer forest.
Right.
But in this area of this is like basically tundra area.
Okay.
So we're talking about maybe some lichen or moss going up in flames. Maybe some spindly little bits of grass that have had a chance to grow for the 2 months of summer that they get up there.
Okay, another question then.
Yeah.
Has anybody looked at wind currents in that time period to see whether there were any high winds blowing high enough or powerful enough to really cause the fires to spread?
Well, then you'd be talking about some actual scientific research that I just don't think we're capable of in this modern era. So that's a tall order.
Yeah, we could go on
good
Flight
luck.
Radar 24 and see in real time 10,000 aircraft flying up in the sky at any given time. Yeah, as well as boats, I would say, if you went on that website too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if it's useless information, if it has anything to do with engineering and engineering where people live and how they live, yeah, you're not going to be able to get really good data on that.
But it doesn't this kind of contradict? You would think that you would think that containing forest fires would be, since they emit so much carbon dioxide, and this seemed, at least a few years back, this seemed to be an obsession with the global governance, is to eradicate carbon dioxide by any means. So you would think that governments around the world would want to be employing as much resources as they possibly could.
Well, here's a bit of an aside, because I was kind of thinking Europe historically has been, it's had quite a lot of civilization and development there for a large amount of time. But I was still thinking that, in especially the Middle Ages, there would be a hell of a lot more wilderness. You have stories about wild wolves and other indications of more of a forest habitation that existed.
Yeah. I think it's been stated that just over since the Industrial Revolution that we basically have maybe 2/3 less forest than we had back then.
Right.
Including also the destruction, eradication, encroachment of ranchers in the Amazonian basin.
Right. And the other interesting factor is that there's no historical point that I can find of a major wildfire event in Western Europe. Now, it might exist, it might be out there. I do know of many instances of urban fires. Even Rome burned down. So we're going way back. But as far as a natural occurring wildfire that made the history books, where they're like, hey, we just lost all of this timber in this region, which you think would be a significant moment, I can't find anything.
Well, and then I also wonder about how conclusive can it be that something was caused by humans, or whether it was a lightning strike, or whether Hercules just threw a bolt out there.
Well, there's the thing. This isn't something that I'm an expert in, but I would still hazard a guess that most naturally occurring fires, if you're talking about lightning strike, a dry lightning where there's no rain, most of those would occur in grasslands for the most part. And the Canadian data is evidencing that, at least historically speaking. Most of the hot spots are muskeg or grasslands or maybe lodgepole pine kind of areas, but no dense conifer areas. Like mid to southern BC almost has nothing really historically. Of course, we know that in the modern age, we're seeing a lot more fires happening in old growth forests, or in forests that, in all likelihood, because they're old growth, they haven't seen a fire ripping through there in hundreds of years.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, kind of like, who gets the contracts to put out these fires, and how accountable when it comes for renewal of the contract, how accountable to the public are these entities?
Well, one interesting, and I hear what you're saying about that, the subcontractors, but I think even more than that is, if you have an old growth, now this is going to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole, but if you have a old growth forest, your ability to cut down that forest and then start building or cultivating, putting ranch land in there, is going to be incredibly hampered. But if the old growth forest just naturally burns to the ground, you're not really destroying anything. You're just cultivating charred land. And I think that what's the interesting trend is not how many fires we're getting, but where we're getting the fires. That's really the interesting component.
And it's surprising that we seem to be incapable of putting out a fire these days,
depending upon its location.
Of course, there's going to be considerations like topography, how many highways maybe help to cut it off, or other natural, streams, rivers, whatever. But once again, get back to the question is, how come there isn't more effort put towards putting these fires out?
Well, but here's the data actually shows that there are less fires. So clearly there is firefighting. So the big question now is, if you've seen a 200, 300, 500% drop in the total amount of area that's affected by forest fires, why is it that a urban center, Fort Mac, for example, or the California fires hitting Southern California, lots of real estate, lots of money, those areas, they seem to be dropping the ball. When you're out in the middle of the bush and there's a couple squirrels that are their homes are being endangered, they seem to be fairly effective, actually, of putting those fires out.
Yeah, I don't know about that, though, because then you wouldn't be getting this huge blanket of smoke that comes all the way from Western Canada, United States.
Well, you know what?
That affects and spreads out.
Yeah, but to that effect, you know what creates a lot of smoke? Things that don't want to burn.
Right.
Dry stuff that wants to burn. Oh yeah, it will go up in flames. But how much smoke is there going to be?
Like the North and South Tower?
But how much smoke is there going to be off of if everything is tinder dry, as they typically will say? You're not going to you might have some carbon in the air, but you're not going to have huge black billows of smoke. That typically is something that doesn't want to go up in flames.
And this could segue into tomorrow's discussion, where we will talk about weather manipulation, where you have huge deluges like what was down in Houston not long ago, where they received an incredible amount. I think it was like maybe 6 or 7 inches in a 24-hour period. This is, unprecedented.
Well, and then there's another factor is that if they're able to control weather patterns and rain, which we'll go into the data of that and the proof that they are not only have the technology but are actively doing it, it does put a huge question mark on out of control fires. And are they simply guiding the direction of these fires to displace people? It sure is handy when you got a bunch of poor Hawaiians on an island that don't want to extricate themselves from that area, just happen to have a fire just blow through the area, and now it's charred remains.
Now, is that a theory or a conspiracy hypothesis?
I think that if you look at the manipulation of data, everything is a conspiracy. Even agreeing with the mainstream would be a conspiracy.
I just can't imagine that office people would sit down and conspire against the workers that are working outside in minus 20.
Yeah. I mean, they probably aren't greedy or lazy or...
But they do know how to keep their mouth shut if it means them getting a slightly better wage.
Okay, I think we've run fairly long on this one. So
yeah, there's a lot there, and we only touched the surface once again. And
well, maybe you did. I got all this research, man. You think getting these charts is easy?
Well, it was like
you
30
just sit
minutes.
your ass down.
It was 30 minutes of work. Come on, let's be honest.
Yeah,
here.
highly efficient
Which means,
work,
though,
by the
that
way.
with 30 minutes of work, anybody could research this. It's like going on Yahoo Finance and find out who owns what.
It's really not that easy, okay?
Well, it's getting more. Obviously, it's getting more difficult because the gatekeepers want to keep that information.
I've gone through the rabbit hole of trying to extrapolate charts and data, and I've gotten kind of efficient at it, but it's really not that easy. For example, because this guy doesn't know, he doesn't do the research. A lot of times when I'll type in a request, I'll get a crap load of stuff that if I'm asking about the Russian forest fire data, for example, I'm getting all kinds of crap. But Cambodia, U.S., you'll get bombarded with a bunch of crap data or crap websites that clearly aren't really providing any tangible data points.
Okay, well, that's a long enough explanation.
And just a sec, because you brought it up. A lot of this data will come from these government agencies, but damn it, if you try to go onto the government agency and actually get the data, it's such a inefficient system, so hard to extrapolate. Really, they're not doing any favors to the public trying to inform them or keep them well informed. Most things that come on the surface are all these like snapshots of like really cheap forms of data that really say absolutely nothing. You can't use it because there's not enough information. It's like a 5-year span, or it's like a huge generalization of a region. Yeah, it's crap.
They could use animation characters to kind of like guide you along there.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
Bugs
not to go
Bunny,
on a
sure.
rant of that. I'll maybe go on a rant about the modern internet and the restricted cesspool
Anyways,
that
it's
it is.
Friday today, right?
Yeah. So
Okay,
we're going to be
so-
back on Monday.
Back on Monday. So
Well, have a good weekend,
have
Papa.
a good weekend too. To you.
All right. Later.